Hey everyone. In this video, I want to talk about the other story that I had given you the option to write about for our essay, our literary analysis essay, A Pair of Silk Stockings. So I think this story definitely has some similar themes to um, the story of an hour, and I think it could be possible if you guys wanted to include both of them in an essay. I think you could have a thesis or an argument about the message that both stories are sending, and then kind of show how both stories send, a similar message. I think that could be a pretty decent approach here. So I'll just go through this and look at some quotes. I think we similarly see something here about kind of the divide between like personal happiness on the one hand and like duty or responsibility to others and specifically to the family on the other hand. um, in the story of an hour, it was, you know, with Mrs. Mallard and her husband. Here we have Mrs. Summers and then kind of her children. And all of this is still in the context of, what it was like for women when these stories were written. So, like, if it was like a different time or a different place, I could imagine us being like, oh well, they're being selfish or something. But like I was trying to say in the other video, I think it's important to consider the context of what it would have been like to grow up at this time. How kind of since they were old enough to know what was going on, I'm sure these women were being asked to sacrifice whatever they want for what other people and specifically family members want. Um, so yeah, so a pair of silk stockings. So it starts off at the beginning. It says, "Little Mrs. Summers one day found herself the unexpected possessor of $15." So again, back in time when the story's written, it seems like $15 a pretty decent amount of money. Obviously, we see what she ends up doing with it and what she plans to do with it. So a lot of money. It seems like now it would be like, I don't know, $100 or something based on all the stuff that she does. So she doesn't tell us how she gets the money, but she comes into possession of this money that is like her own to do with. Like it seems like um, they don't really mention her husband in the story, but I'm assuming that she does have one. It seems like he is not aware of this money. The children in the family not aware of this money. She's the only one who knows about it. And yeah, if she were to spend it all on herself, say, nobody would know. But yeah, so she comes into possession of this money, and then it says for a day or two she walks about in a dreamy state, absorbed in speculation and calculation. So basically, she's thinking about, well, what am I going to do with this money? How can I, portion it out? And then the third paragraph here on the first page, it gives us like the plan that she's making for what she's going to do with this money, right? It says a dollar or two should be added to the price usually paid for Janie's shoes. She'd buy so many yards of something for new shirt waists for the boys and Janie and Mag. I don't know exactly what a shirt waist is. I guess that's part of the clothing that they had at the time. But yeah, right. So she's basically thinking about buying clothes, for her children. Uh, Mag should have another gown. It says she'd seen some beautiful patterns. There would still be left enough. There'd still be left enough for new stockings, 2 pairs apiece. So she's going to get stockings for all the kids. She would get caps for the boys and sailor hats for the girls. I guess girls were sailor hats. I guess that was the fashion of the time. I don't know about that one. Maybe want to reconsider that. Maybe don't get the sailor hat. I don't know. That'd be my advice. But so it just gives us the list of all the different things that she's thinking about buying. All of it's for her children, right? None of the things in that list are for herself. It mentions the stockings, but I'm pretty sure she's also buying those for the children. Obviously, she ends up buying stockings for herself later. But I think that's the important thing is that she has this money, and her first impulse is like, okay, well, how can I? And it seems like she has a lot of children. I don't know how many different names it gives us there. Let's say what, at least like at least five, if not more. It doesn't give us a full count really. I'd say she's got like at least 5 kids though. She's like, okay, I'm gonna get shoes for this one and stockings for this one and hats for all of them and shirts for these kids. So she's just planning out how she's basically not planning to spend any of it on herself, right? And I think this gets back to what we've been talking about here with like the way that I think women um definitely at this time and even I think somewhat today there's a sense that like women are supposed to sacrifice themselves for the family in a way that men are not expected to. Obviously every parent has to make sacrifices for their children. That's what being a parent is, I guess. Not that I would know, but I'm assuming that's what it is. But I think at this time it's like again, we don't see her husband in this story, but I think we can assume that her husband probably spends some money on himself, probably not in the same way. Like if he got $15, he probably wouldn't immediately be like, oh, here's exactly what I'm going to get for each of the kids. So I just think there was a different expectation. Obviously, both parents are going to have to sacrifice for kids, but I think there's just more of an expectation that women should be the ones to make that sacrifice more. I think there's a higher level of expectation there. So she goes out. Let me see here. Um, it says the needs of the present absorbed her every faculty is a quote that we get in the fourth paragraph. So that's just another way of thinking about her mindset at the time. She's just constantly trying to, it's like the when the dam starts leaking and you're just trying to plug all the holes, right? That's kind of her approach to just making sure that her kids, don't look like too shabby or that their clothes aren't too old or damaged and stuff like that. So she goes out with the plan to buy all these things that she listed in that paragraph. Um, and I'm looking, this is what, maybe the fifth paragraph on the fifth page. It says, but that day she was a little faint and tired. She had swallowed a light luncheon. No, when she came to think of it, between getting the children fed and the place righted, and preparing herself for the shopping bout, she had actually forgotten to eat any luncheon at all. Which luncheon is just lunch, right? She didn't eat lunch. She forgot to eat lunch because she was so busy taking care of the kids and planning on going shopping for the kids, not for herself, right? She spent some time planning to go shopping, but it was for all of the shopping. Her plan is that it's only for other people, basically. So I think this again just shows like the level of like neglect that she had for herself and her own happiness and even her own basic needs, right? Obviously, eating lunch, kind of necessary. I mean, I don't know what she had for breakfast. Maybe she had a big breakfast, but in general, and obviously, she's feeling faint and tired because of it. So clearly, she needed to eat and was so absorbed in, again, her responsibility, her duty to the family that she doesn't even do it. She just pretty much forgets. And so I think when we're looking at these stories, if like the attitude at the time was that like, oh, that's appropriate, that it's normal and good for women to neglect their own happiness or their own desires because of the duty or responsibility to the family, again, in a way that men weren't expected to do the same thing. If that's what the story is showing us, I think we also can say that the story is criticizing that idea. The story's against that idea. And I think that's something that's important for this type of essay is we don't want to just say, well, the story shows us what it was like back then. Yes, that's true. But we want to say the story shows us what it was like that back then to say that it's bad, to say specifically that this was wrong and not how it should be, and that there should be a better situation for women. Okay, so then she goes shopping, and it says, yeah, and again she's faint and tired, and it says, moving up to the last paragraph on the first page, says an all gone limp feeling had come over her, and she rested her hand aimlessly upon the counter. So she's like basically like about to faint, and she puts her hand down, and then what does she put her hand down on? A bunch of silk stockings, right? And this is where I don't know if she has like a kind of realization here. Just continuing to read, it says, by degrees, she was aware her hand had encountered something very soothing, something very pleasant to touch. She looked down to see her hand lay upon a pile of silk stockings. Um, and then it says a girl who worked at the store comes over to her and asked her if she wished to examine their line of silk hosiery. Mrs. Summers smiled, just as if she had been asked to inspect a tiara of diamonds with the ultimate view of purchasing it. So for her, the idea of silk stockings is like an absurd luxury, right? Again, we have to change in our minds how much money it is. Obviously, $1.98 doesn't seem like a lot, but clearly it is at that time. So for her, that's like, yeah, an absurd luxury. She compares it to if she was considering buying a tiara of diamonds, which again, which is what a queen or a princess would wear, just absurd luxury. And that's not something that she does. She doesn't do luxury for herself. She does, taking care of the family. She does making sure everyone else has their shoes. And even though I don't think the children necessarily are getting luxurious stuff, but they're at least getting, clean stuff, new stuff to look like presentable. So then she starts looking at these silk stockings, right? And then she asked the woman, "Do you think there are any 8.5s among these?" So she's asking if they have her size. And then she ends up buying a pair of silk stockings, right? and it says that she kind of like stops thinking. Like we don't get a lot of what's going on inside of her head. Maybe that would be an interesting question for you guys to consider. Like, what do you think is going on in her mind when she decides to buy the silk stockings? Like, I don't think she forgot what her plan was in terms of buying clothes for the kids and everything. But she ends up buying them. And so looking at the, I'm on the second page now, looking at like the third paragraph on the second page. And then she goes up to she doesn't go to the bargain bin where she usually goes shopping. It says that she goes up to the next floor, and she changes out of her old stockings that were cotton, which is not, you know, as good or as expensive as silk, right? And she puts on the new ones, and she just sits there for a moment and kind of, you know, enjoys like the luxury of it. Um, Again, in the third paragraph on the second page, says she was not going through any acute mental process of reasoning with herself, nor was she striving to explain to her satisfaction the motive of her action. She was not thinking at all. So I guess maybe that's the answer to my question. She wasn't thinking at all. She's just kind of doing it. I guess she, in a way, and maybe it's because she was, you know, faint and tired and you know, seeming like on the borderline of actually fainting. Um, maybe that, you know, helped her to put some of her usual thinking about, you know, which is only for other people, right? And she's kind of just going more on instinct. She's just like, oh well, these are nice, maybe I'll buy these. uh it says she was not thinking at all. She seemed for the time to be taking a rest from that laborious and fatiguing function, and to have abandoned herself to some mechanical impulse that directed her actions and freed her of responsibility. So I think that's an important line, that she starts to feel freed of responsibility, because that's the whole thing, right? Like I was saying, it's responsibility on the one hand and like your own happiness on the other hand, and those things coming into conflict. I think is what the story is trying to show us. Um, and then it says, you know, how good was the touch of raw silk to her flesh? It says she lay there for a while and just enjoyed it. Let me see. And then she goes and buys some other stuff. She buys some shoes, right? Um, Looking at the next paragraph of page two, it says that she wanted an excellent and stylish fit. She told the young fellow who served her, and she did not mind the difference of $1 or two in the price, so long as she got what she desired. So now she's really living it up, right? She's like, I want the nicest shoes. I want the most stylish ones. If it's a little more money, whatever, who cares? And this is, you know, very at odds with how she was planning to spend this money before, when it was all very regimented out of what she was going to get for each kid and everything like that. And now she's like, if it's a couple dollars more, no big deal. It says it was a long time since Mrs. Summers had been fitted with gloves. So now she goes and gets gloves, and you know, those like old fashioned gloves that go like down your arm or whatever. Like, I think that's what she's buying here, not like you know, like winter gloves or mittens, but more those those white gloves that come down to your elbow or something, I think is what she's going with. So yeah, she has. It says, you know, she used to always buy the ones that were on sale, and they would never fit her right, and they weren't, you know. So this time she actually has her hand measured, and the glove, you know, fits like a glove maybe. Um, Continuing on the last paragraph, the second page, there were books and magazines piled up in the window of a stall a few paces down the street. Mrs. Summers bought two high-priced magazines, so she's spending money on magazines, which are just entertainment, right? And again, it doesn't seem like a lot, but for her, these are definitely luxuries. So I think what we've seen is her again having the intention of, you know, not worrying about herself, neglecting her own wants, neglecting her own desires, doing what's best for the family, what's best for the kids, forgetting about herself, and then she's kind of experienced a switch here where now she kind of starts doing stuff for herself, and I think she likes that. I think she enjoys it, right? I mean, I don't know. Should we criticize her for being selfish? Should we say, oh well, that was really selfish? How could you spend the money on magazines for yourself when you know, when the kids need new shoes, and the girls need sailor hats? What are we gonna do if the girls don't have sailor hats, right? So she gets magazines for herself, and then continuing on, that she's not done there, she keeps going. She was very hungry. Another time, she would have stilled the cravings for food until she reached her own home, where she would have brewed herself a cup of tea and taken a snack of anything that was available. Um, you know, it's, this is when you're out, and you know, it's like, well, we have food at home, right? We have McDonald's at home, Um, so normally she would have waited to get home and just eaten what was ever around, probably a piece of bread or some cheese or something like that. But this time, she doesn't do that. There was a restaurant at the corner. She had never entered its doors. From the outside, she had caught glimpses of the shining crystals and soft-stepping waiters serving people of fashion. So it's a fashionable restaurant, and she goes there instead, right? She orders this whole meal. Um, She reads her magazine. She orders a meal here. What does she get? Let's see. She gets blue points, which I think are oysters. I think I'm right. Maybe I don't know. Unless it meant something else at that time. I think a blue point oyster, a plump chop. I don't know what kind of chop. I guess I don't know, pork chop, beef chop. I don't know. Some kind of meat dish though, right? Uh, Something sweet. A creme frappe. I don't know exactly what that is. I don't know if that's a frappe like we know it like coffee or whatever. I don't know exactly what it is, but you know what? It doesn't matter, right? We don't have to know that French word because it tells us, she got something sweet, so we can assume that's whatever, some kind of dessert. Uh, a glass of Rhine wine. She gets a glass of wine, and after all, a small cup of black coffee. So she really goes all out with this meal, right? She's got that's always been to me the judge of a truly luxurious meal when you have like multiple drinks, when you have like three or four different drinks going on. You've got like you've got like coffee, you've got like orange juice, you've got some kind of alcohol for me, maybe the orange juice is a mimosa. Um, got water, you've got all that. That's always a luxurious meal. And then it says, right. So she tasted the bite. She read her words too. She sipped the amber wine and wiggled her toes in the silk stockings. So she's just really enjoying all this. The price of it made no difference. So that's the place where she's gotten as all this happens. And I don't know. Maybe you guys have ever had experience like this where it's like, you generally, and this is how it is for me. You generally kind of don't have a lot of money. You're just getting from week to week. You have the bills. You have whatever cheap stuff you get from the grocery store, and then like I guess for me, it's kind of like when you get your tax return or something, and it's like, oh wow, I just got like $1,000. I don't, and like I already had like plans to pay for all my other stuff, and I wasn't really expecting it. But, whoa, what am I gonna do with this? And just that feeling of like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. And you end up blowing it. You probably should have saved it, but that's kind of where she's at with this. It says, yeah, the price of it made no difference. She counted the money out to the waiter and left an extra coin on his tray. So she gives him an extra big tip. He bows to her. And then continuing on page 3, it says there was still money in her purse, and her next temptation presented itself in the shape of a matinee poster. A matinee is like a show that's during the day, right? I think in her case it's a play. Nowadays they talk about a matinee as a movie. Movie theaters have cheaper prices for a matinee sometimes if you go at 2 p.m. or whatever. So she goes to see a play. She enjoys that. She talks to the woman next to her and everything. Um, and then I want to go down to the second to last paragraph on this last page. It says the play was over, the music ceased, the crowd filed out. It was like a dream ended. People scattered in all directions. Mrs. Summer went to the corner and waited for the cable car. So now her fun is kind of over, right? I think at this point she kind of has spent all the money, and now she's gonna go home. And then we get to our last paragraph here. It says a man with keen eyes who sat opposite to her seemed to like the study of her small pale face. It puzzled him to decipher what he saw there. In truth, he saw nothing unless he were wizard enough to detect a poignant wish, a powerful longing that the cable car would never stop anywhere, but go on and on with her forever. So I think this is, I think it's saying that that was the wish that Mrs. Summers had. It takes us to the point of view of someone like looking at her, um, and I guess from the outside you wouldn't realize that her like one day of luxury is over. She's taking the cable car to go home. Once she goes home, she is not going to be able to continue enjoying the luxury of all this, but also she might have to then confront the fact that she didn't get the new stuff for the children and everything. So it says she has a powerful longing that the cable car would never stop anywhere but go on with her forever. So it's almost like she doesn't want to return back to the life that she had. um and I think really with this story, and it's short, there's not all that much that happens, but I think what we really see is like, yeah, this is the one day for her where with the divide between your own happiness and responsibility to others, where she does choose her own happiness. And I guess I would ask you, like, does the story support what she did here, or does the story think that what she did here is bad? I think my answer would be that the story supports it. I think the story is trying to say, like, I don't know. Maybe it's bad that it's like that. This is such a like crazy thing to her, that this is something that she's just never done before. But I think it's supposed to make us view what she did in a positive way. Again, you can look at it from one view and say that she's selfish. She should have not have spent the money on herself. She should have spent it on the kids. But I think the story tries to show us, like, within this world, that she spent her whole life in, where she doesn't do anything for herself. She forgets to eat lunch. She's doing everything for everyone else. Again, I was talking about in the other video the situation that I think women would go through during this time, where when they were younger, they would be doing stuff for siblings or for parents and stuff, and then once you got old enough to kind of be on your own, people were getting married at such a young age that it was like, oh, you're transferred over from that family to now the husband, and now you have your own family. Now you have to have all the same duties and responsibilities for your own children now. So I think what this story tries to show us is like that one moment that she does get to take for herself. So in terms of the essay here, I think we would want to have a thesis again that makes an argument about the message the story is sending. And I think as far as that goes, we would want to say that the story, tries to criticize the way that the expectation that women were supposed to sacrifice themselves for others. The same way I think both these stories try to get us on the side of the main character. Like even though again with Josephine in the other story, Mrs. Mallard in the Story of an Hour, you could say that it's selfish of her to have some kind of joy at her husband dying. That seems terrible, right? But it's because she similarly is now going to get to think about herself. So I think they both try to show us kind of positive examples of women putting themselves first, you know. And maybe that seems like an obvious point to make, in 2022, but in 1895, that was kind of radical, right? So I think the time period's important here. All right, so I just want to highlight some quotes there, give you my analysis of the story, just to again kind of help you guys move towards your own. So, all right, that's all for now. Talk to you soon.